You can make money the hard way becoming a bullfighter, or save money the easy way with Xfinity Mobile. It sure beats making money as a human cannonball. Learn how existing Xfinity customers can get a free line of unlimited intro for a year when they buy one unlimited line. Plus, now through February 27th, ask how to get the new Samsung Galaxy S24 with 128 gigabytes on us. Visit XfinityMobile.com today. Free unlimited line offer ends March 21st. Restrictions apply. Xfinity Mobile requires Xfinity Internet. Reduced speeds up to 20 gigabytes of usage per line. Data thresholds may vary.
Meet Stacy. Stacy's on the hunt for a new pair of trendy glasses.
Call me picky, but I just can't find the one.
Luckily for Stacy, Walmart Vision has virtual try-on. Now she can try on hundreds of frames virtually, then upload her prescription and get new glasses delivered right to her door.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Well, the hunt just took a turn for the better.
Buy your next pair of glasses with virtual try-on from Walmart. Welcome to Easy Eye Care. Welcome to your Walmart. Restrictions apply. See walmart.com for details.
To get the Crime Writers on Aftershow right now, go to patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, a young filmmaker sets off to find his mother's killer, but instead learns a whole lot about family dysfunction. In the CWO Classic Rewind, we'll talk about HBO's Murder on Middle Beach.
It is such an understatement.
Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, the very functional Kevin Flynn. Hello, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
So, Kevin, this is Thursday's podcast.
It is.
What are we talking about on Monday's program?
Yeah, Monday we get back to our regular programming schedule, and we'll kick off the week with a look at the HBO Max documentary series, The Truth About Jim.
So, Kevin, I am super excited about this CWO Classic Rewind.
Yes.
What are we talking about?
We're going back to December 7th, 2020, and it's the middle of the pandemic.
Yes.
We're all tied up at home. It was the end of the year, and then this came in like a wrecking ball. It's our review of Murder on Middle Beach.
I mean, I don't want to spoil the episode for anybody, but I think about this documentary.
33 years old, yeah.
I think about this documentary all the time still. It is one of my all-time favorite, if not my all-time favorite documentary we've ever done on the show.
All right, well, how about we listen to that? I guess we're going to spoil it and say Rebecca's a thumbs up.
Thumbs up!
Let's go back and listen to our review.
We start with breaking news in Madison tonight, where a body has been found in a waterfront home there. Police tonight are treating it as a homicide.
News Channel 8 first on the scene at Middle Beach Road.
In 2010, Barbara Beach Hamburg was bludgeoned to death outside her Connecticut home. The immediate suspect was her controlling ex-husband, who was due in family court that day for a settlement hearing. But when DNA failed to match him, the case went cold.
I just want to know why that why you can't even just talk to me.
I know you want to know answers, and I know you want to know about your mom.
First as a film student and later as a professional documentarian, Madison Hamburg began interviewing relatives and investigating leads in an attempt to find why his mother was killed. Was it an act of revenge for a pyramid scheme, an act of rage by a troubled family member, or an act of greed in a mysterious financial web?
It was just women getting together, and it was all cash-based, and it was all terribly secret.
In HBO's 4-part Murder on Middle Beach, Hamburg offers an intimate look at a troubled family and his own painful search for answers. Now, just to note, we recorded this episode before last night's series finale of Murder on Middle Beach, so we, as of this taping, do not know how the story ends. But if you want to remain spoiler-free for the first 3 episodes and maybe miss some of our wild speculation about what's going to be in episode 4, go to the estimated time code in our show notes. Now, Kevin Flynn, college student allegedly making a film for a school project, interviewing some of his relatives about his mother's murder. Do you think any of these relatives thought that anyone would ever see these interviews?
I mean, even at the end, the later interviews, I still got the sense they were like, oh, Maddie, you're such a sweet boy with this hobby. Good luck with your only the professor's going to see it or something.
He smokes so much pot, he's never going to actually turn this thing in.
He has all these lights.
The grandmother who was like, I hope you get a good grade on this.
Yes. Hope you get a 4-part deal with HBO.
Yeah. Toby, what do you think? I mean, Madison ends up having conversations with his family through the frame of making this film that I just kept thinking he probably wasn't having these conversations if there wasn't a camera present, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I really like this. And I think that's one of the things that was kind of appealing about it is that he is using the documentary as it's really, he's trying to figure out what the story is in a way that he couldn't do if he was just walking around talking to people. Like he needs to have that camera lens there to be able to ask questions like, did you kill my mom?
Did you have anything to do with the murder?
No.
I have to ask everyone.
It's okay. No.
When I first kind of knew what the concept was and the way they tease it, I was sort of dreading watching it because I think it could have been super depressing. But in fact, I thought it was really interesting. And I think in addition to, his kind of going around and talking to people and the facts of the case and the fact that there's all these potential stories that led to her murder, I think it's also interesting to see the way he interacts with these people in his life who he knew growing up, his aunts, his estranged father, his sister, and how I feel like we get a pretty good sense of his perception of them based on his life with them. And he doesn't go out. It's not open and blatant, but you do get the sense of who's reliable and who's not reliable. And I thought in particular, his sort of being protective of his little sister when her name comes up and his aunt kind of accuses her of it. Again, I thought gave a lot of insight into kind of how he views his family, which I thought was just super interesting.
Lara, what do you think about the access? I mean, Madison really has unique access to all of the figures that are potentially in this story, right?
Yeah, and I think that is really what kind of sets us apart because, a lot of times we watch documentaries and we get some access to archival footage, and that's, helpful in sort of bringing a story to life as they're talking about things that happened in the past. But I mean, he has all the old home movies and home videos and pictures and, that level of intimacy that we would not be able to really understand without somebody like him that was, right there in the middle of the family. It was definitely interesting to watch him try to stay sort of he stayed pretty even keeled, even as he was out there talking to different family members, you never saw him, I didn't think, get riled up. He just kept asking questions in the same way. But again, it goes back to he had the access, but again, half of these people probably didn't think this was actually going to end up on HBO when they were giving him that access.
Oh, they didn't. I mean, so you can tell they didn't like what they're wearing even on camera.
Yeah.
In some of the interviews.
I can imagine what some of them think when they look at that, the dad, you videotape me in that bar?
Yeah, talk about that, Kevin, because that scene
I have some questions about that.
That was in New York, which I will say is not a two-party consent state. It was in New York that he filmed him. No, he filmed him in New York.
Okay.
And I only know this because I helped work on a story where I work, where it was the Lakeview story, remember? Where that mother was making phone calls and taping them. Yeah. And you can secretly tape people in some states and not in others. And New York is one of the states in which you can do that. I believe that's how he's able to do that and include in the film. Legal would not have let him include it if it wasn't legal where he was doing it, right? I mean, this is an HBO. This isn't like a podunk network airing this thing. But Kevin,
yes,
what did you think of that? Because you can't say he didn't try.
Oh my God, with his dad.
Yeah.
No, I mean, we see it, I think, at least 3 times where he kind of confronts him, not, in a way that is both professional as a journalist, but also reasonable as a son, wanting to know what happened to his mom.
You could say something to Mom. What would you say?
It's your mother? I have nothing to say.
Nothing to say there.
You know, it starts off where he, you know, in the very beginning where his dad's like, oh, your mom had a lot of secrets. And then we get the whole story of episode 1 of the dad and the mom's relationship, the fact that he was immediately a suspect.
Yeah.
And is a strong suspect.
Yep.
And I think the only thing sort of eliminating him is DNA.
Oh, I don't eliminate him for a second.
Well, a lot of people say like, oh, well, the DNA didn't match.
Doesn't
but
matter.
what we know, we know 2 DNA things. And then we get this again because he recorded himself with the cops.
Yeah.
I can't believe that.
Yeah, that was crazy.
That's the part I was like,
Yeah.
what the fuck? What is happening?
I don't think he knew any better. So in any event, you got great stuff.
So I don't want to give you any false hope that the fact that you're sitting here means we're about to give you answers that you deserve. You understand what I mean? I respect that. I want to help, and I definitely don't want to hinder.
The cops told him about 2 things. There was a cigarette butt, which was his, that they found outside near the body or whatever. Doesn't mean he was there recently. We know that he smoked. We know that while he was in college, though, that he lived there. So there's no telling how old that cigarette butt was.
Right.
But they did test it. So they know they do have his DNA. The second thing was the DNA under the fingernails. What they said, not that it didn't match, they said it was of Hamburg family lineage. Right? So a male lineage. So I think that while it doesn't exclude either Madison or his father, it doesn't say that it's them.
Well, keep in mind,
it doesn't exclude them.
But he's hearing this from the cops who are not going to tell him everything about what they know.
That's true.
I mean, I'd like for us to rampantly speculate about our theories a little bit later, because boy, do I have some. But Laura, you actually had a lot of questions about his methods, right? I mean, you were a private investigator, defense investigator. You kind of understand the ins and outs of talking to people. And like, what did you think when you saw him walk into that police station with that secret recorder?
I was just like, what are you doing? I should have looked up like, okay, that was Connecticut and New York and stuff like that. But I guess, I know there's states where this is legal, but it just gave me the sense of like, he is being so sneaky and like, just like this undercover. Like, I would love to go undercover and record people and all that stuff, but you can't do it in New Hampshire where we live. And also, even if you could do it, if there's something that just feels a little bit wrong about it to me, like it feels like, I guess I'm kind of curious what the police have had to say since they found out that they are now on HBO. I mean, they definitely, when you listen to it, it was like total cop speak. I mean, they're like, I'm listening to them, I'm like, oh, here we go. Like, well, you're going to give us your tapes? Well, we can't tell you, but you can tell us and all that stuff. And it was like, even when they weren't questioning him as a suspect, it felt like they were questioning him as a suspect, that sort of thing. But I was just, I don't know. It just sort of gave me a feeling of like, wow, you're really pushing the boundaries there to do this sort of secret taping thing.
But don't forget, he was a kid, and he still is, like in some respects,
But he's not a child.
I know he's not a child, but Kevin and I have this argument all the time about when somebody is a kid and when they're not. And I'm like, I'm sorry, when you're 18, you're not a fucking adult. You're not.
The law says you are.
The law says you are, but your amygdala says you're not.
That's not what. Well,
that being said, Toby, what did you think of all the subterfuge that we see Madison engage in to get material for this film?
I think it's 2 different things with his dad and with the cops. Like, one of the strong senses I get watching it is that he's used to the adults in his life disappointing him. And so I feel as though he felt that his dad owed talking to him or him being able to sort of document what his dad has to say, whether his dad likes it or not. And I don't think there's any definite yes or no answer to that. But that was the sense I got there. The thing with the police, I mean, it was funny. I kind of thought it was funny, the conversation they have in the car on the way over. It's sort of like, oh, why the fuck not? Give it a shot, see what happens. And then the producer's like, oh, he's been in there for quite a while now.
He might have been caught.
But again, like, I don't really, I mean, maybe there's some ethical things there or whatever. But again, he's going into the situation. It's his mom that was killed, and these cops are just trying to manipulate him.
Right.
And, I could see from his point of view, it's like, fuck yeah, I'm going to get him on tape. This is my mom. I am not a suspect. I'm not the victim, but I am a victim of what happened. And if these cops are just going to be giving me a hard time, I'm happy to have that on tape. So that's fine. That's fine by me.
I totally agree with you, Toby. I think I would feel very differently about it if he were an amateur investigator or podcaster or even a journalist who parachuted into this story and decided to tell it for a documentary. I'd feel very differently about it.
If his amygdala was developed in a different way?
No. Than if he wasn't the victim's son.
Oh, okay.
Like he does to me have a different, not maybe like legal set of rights, but a different ethical set of rights, being the victim's son and ergo a victim himself. I think Toby's right on that. And I just kept thinking about, remember what I said about Catch and Kill when I speculated that Ronan Farrow tapes everything, which I still believe he does, which is how he's able to document so many conversations. Ronan Farrow was working at a place where things were fucked up. So he was sort of like a part of that. And so him taping it is very different than if I just walked into NBC and randomly started taping people, right?
Right.
So that's very much how I feel about this. Kevin, question for you. So we hear about this. So the dad sort of comes up as a suspect. And then in episode 2, it sort of lays out this financial scheme that the victim was involved in, these gifting tables, which were a big scandal, sort of suburban Ponzi scheme along the lines of the airplane game that we heard about in The Dream.
Yeah.
What did you think of that and the fact that she was involved in that and all these people, including Jill, by the way, who I think went to prison for a little while, right?
She did.
What did you think about that? And do you think it has any bearing on this crime?
Well, ultimately, I don't know. It seems that there are 3 theories of the crime, and one is the dad, and one is that a relative who, either under the influence of drugs or mental illness, killed her in a rage, which would either be Barbara's sister, Conway, or Barbara's daughter, which I think her name is Allie.
Yeah.
Right. But the other one, which was episode 2, was the fact that Barbara was involved in this pyramid scheme, and I think that Madison does a good job of trying to vet all 3 of the theories. And in some ways, I think he is working to exonerate his sister, but he plays it very even-handedly. I think he handles her very much the same way as anyone else. I don't think he gave her special treatment, but I think that he also put her up there for the viewer to see and to understand, tell her in her own words. I don't believe Allie so much when she's like, oh, everything was great with mom, where, Conway is saying that, oh, she would yell and everything. I mean, that's way more likely for a teenager who has been going through some emotional stuff that, I'm more likely to believe, the doors were slammed a lot as opposed to, we just did everything together and la, la, la.
Both can be true.
Both can be true.
Literally,
at different times, both can be true. Right. But back to the pyramid scheme, I thought that was really fast. And it wasn't sort of a tangential thing in her life, right? It was a big thing. So, you can't dismiss it out of hand as being a motive.
Yeah. Now, Laura, I just kept thinking about MLMs generally. I mean, this is basically a pyramid scheme, which MLMs are. And I just kept thinking, this is obviously a different kind of pyramid scheme that involves actual just cash. It's like the airplane game, like I said. But I don't know. I just kept thinking, just because she's doing this, lots of people are doing it. Lots of people sell Tupperware or Color Street nails or those stupid leggings or Leah Sophia jewelry or whatever. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean anything about whether or not they are more likely to be a victim of murder as a result, except the idea that there was a lot of cash around sort of changes this a little bit. What do you think of this angle?
I definitely thought that was an interesting avenue to explore. I mean, I hate to say, when you watch this, you're definitely leaning pretty heavily towards the ex-husband. I mean, and I feel like that still. But that being said, I did sort of perk up during this part going, you've got all of these Connecticut housewives doing this scheme, and you're looking at the map and you're realizing that this is the way they use the illustrations to kind of show the magnitude of this scheme. And then hearing about how they were dividing up the territories and how there was some hard feelings and people that knew that, in this house, there was like $90,000 or whatever it was. And then, that Madison's mom was sort of like the queen of this, dinner party game. I thought it was so interesting the way they named them. The appetizers, the salads, the desserts. Entrees, the desserts. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to totally make up like code names for something in my life. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but I was listening to, I was like,
keep it legal.
So fun. Yeah, no, totally legal. But I think that it was good to throw, although it was to me not as convincing, but like sort of this little red herring out there. Oh, let's look at these people in this multi-level marketing scheme. And I liked that, he had access to the former attorney general and
now senator.
Yes, Blumenthal, right?
Richard Blumenthal,
yeah.
It just to kind of sense this was huge. And then you find out one of Madison's aunts actually went to jail in this scheme. I mean, that is when you're like, well, people went to jail. This is something where maybe, but it was also crazy. I'm like, I'm sorry, but who are these people that are bringing $5,000 just to join a club? Like Rebecca.
Well, they're going to get 40,000 back. I mean, it's just like when you send your chain letter, right, Toby?
I thought what was really interesting about that too was the argument that Jill and Barbara get into is because Barbara's trying to get one of their relatives who doesn't have the money and doesn't have the friends who she can recruit to get into the game. So she's just going to pay money that she doesn't have, and then she's going to fail. And Barbara's okay with that, right? She's like, no, this is fine. And Jill's like, no, there's no way she can succeed. You're just screwing her. And you also hear that Barbara's getting like AA friends involved. So it seems like in addition to the fact that there's this sort of Ponzi scheme going on, and it's huge, and they're among the ringleaders, and I think it's pretty strongly implied that Barbara was going to probably go to jail if she'd lived, is she's bringing in people who are going to lose, like who are going to be the people who inevitably don't get their money back.
Right.
And don't have that money to lose in the first place. So that was an interesting point to be making about his mother. And I don't know how much of it was news to him. It seemed like it might have been. But again, I thought that was kind of insightful. And in a lot of ways, like he doesn't come off as an angry person.
Right.
But this feels like a pretty angry documentary.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it does.
And, it's like every single adult who is in his life, except for his grandmother, who seems like she has her act together, everybody else has failed him.
Right.
In some way, big or small. And they all love him, and he seems to love them back. But this is, exposing a lot of like very difficult things about these people who are in his family.
I agree. And this actually brings me to an ethical question I wanted to ask you all. So I'm going to speculate. It is my opinion. Maybe episode 4 will bear this out differently. This will be a horrible take by the time this podcast comes out. It is my fervent opinion that the most likely suspect here is the father for several reasons. One is he had a hearing that day in their divorce, which the timing of her death and that hearing, you cannot ignore that. Plus his behavior in refusing to discuss it the way he refuses to discuss it, specifically where he tells his child that his lawyers won't let him talk about it, is just so upsetting and disturbing to me. And I just can't imagine even somebody who did it, who was less calculating, would just lie and say, no, I had nothing to do with it. But he won't even do that. And then also his father, we can't forget, despite the fact that he won that lawsuit, does have kind of a suspicious record of his own with money and his jobs and potential fraudulent activity and so forth. This isn't necessarily like a huge stand-up guy. That being said, one of the ethical questions I had about this is if Madison suspects one of these people over everyone else, which I think it's reasonable to say he probably does, or even if he doesn't, He has put all of the members of his family on film in a serialized thing that comes out episode by episode and sort of put each of them in the frame as potential suspects. Episode 1, it's his dad. Episode 2, it's, the MLM stuff and his mom is the most culpable. And then he has sort of Conway, who that's another whole story. What do you guys think? I'm curious about kind of the ethics of a family member who maybe or maybe doesn't suspect another family member of being the main person in the frame, who's willing to put like their sister in the frame for viewers to decide for even just a minute. What do you think, Kevin?
Well, like we always say in nonfiction, you either betray your subject or you betray your audience.
Yep.
And he is not betraying the audience.
Nope.
Right. And he's showing what he's discovered and what he's learned. I don't think he's presenting a distorted picture of the rest of his family. But I think I think he's trying to give sort of equal time to these other theories that it could have been somebody else.
Well, the family gives them equal time, right?
Yeah. And so, again, would it be a very uncomfortable Thanksgiving dinner? Thanksgiving Zoom dinner?
Sending Conway a Christmas card.
No, but still to hear people talk. I mean, even if it was 7 years ago, remember when, your crazy aunt did blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But, just one other follow-up. It looks like from the promo for episode 4, which everybody already watched, like they're discovering some international financial documents, and Dad was always an international traveler, and where the fuck did his money go?
He may have had foreign bank accounts, which was teased in episode 1.
And it would be a great motive, but I don't know. Anyhow.
What do you think of the ethics of that, Laura?
I think it's a good year that they had a Zoom Thanksgiving, just saying. And they didn't all have to be in the same house together. Well, I think it's interesting because I think that it does put it in a different light than if it, say, was like an independent filmmaker who's like, well, these are the suspects and this is who I think did it. In a way, I think it gives him a little bit more freedom to put out who he thinks did it because he's connected to the case. So it's definitely, it's burning some bridges with the family, I would think, going down the road in light of him moving ahead with this documentary project. But I do think that when you are personally involved, that gives you a little bit more permission maybe to say what you think happened.
Yeah. What do you think, Toby, about the ethics of sort of putting family members in the frame when you may or may not suspect one of them is more culpable or is culpable and the others are not?
It's hard because I feel like in some cases they put themselves in the frame.
Yep.
Like, I don't think Conway, he didn't have to do much with her. She just kind of came right out and said it.
No, I just want to be like, Conway, please stop talking. Conway, ask for a lawyer, for God's sakes.
I mean, she did a lot of work for him. She did the work on herself. She did the work on Allie.
Yep.
And then he was supposed to just like, I don't see this working.
But my ulterior plan was to get all my money out of my 401k plan and get revenge against my baby sister, your mother, your father, and both of you. You and Allie.
How?
I wanted to hire a hitman.
So I come back to the thought that, there's a lot of anger in this. And I think it seems to me that from his standpoint, it's more exposing stuff rather than putting people in frames. It's tough, man. I mean, this family dysfunction is playing out with one member of the family just kind of laying it out there for everybody. And quite honestly, he and his sister were, sort of the secondary victims of the murder of their mother. But I think we're also the primary victims of a completely messed up upbringing where their father was estranged. Their mother and seemingly everybody in her family, except for the grandmother, were alcoholics or drug abusers. And, there's a lot of neglect. And then when the mom cleaned up, then she got involved in this crazy gifting table stuff.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, ethically, it's probably a little bit weird. But from his standpoint, I feel like I get it.
Yep.
And I don't necessarily blame him. You know, I'm sure he's kind of like, yeah, well, it's kind of chickens coming home to roost, right? You know, it's karma.
Yeah. I did love your note, Toby, where you said, it is fairly weird that a fairly normal upper middle class Connecticut woman would have multiple people who could have conceivably murdered her. I agree.
It is weird, isn't it?
It's a little weird. It is. All right. I think we should do what we do. Let's let our listeners know. Should they check out Murder on Middle Beach on HBO and HBO Max if they haven't already? I'm going to go around the horn. Thumbs up or thumbs down. Laura Bricker, what do you think about Murder on Middle Beach?
Yeah, I'm going to say thumbs up. You should watch this. I think, we watch a lot of different documentaries about murder cases and unsolved murders from different perspectives. And in this case, it's told through the eyes of the son. We have access to all of the family members, lots of archival footage. Really interesting to watch this story unfold. So I would say thumbs up.
Toby Ball, what about you?
I think I've said before that I sort of feel like the true crime documentary formula has been kind of, they've cracked it. Like they figured out how to make these things. And so all these documentaries are very well crafted, and it often comes down to how compelling the story is or whatever. So that's why something like Trial 4, which I liked quite a bit, but there's a certain sameness to a lot of them in the feel. And this is not like that. It does in some ways fall to those conventions, but it's so different in so many other ways. I like this a lot more than any documentary we watched in quite a while in sort of the HBO, Netflix style. So I give it a really big thumbs up. I'm looking forward to the final episode. And again, there might be some parts that aren't as good as what some like larger budget, bigger documentaries have done. But I think just the fact that it sort of breaks the mold or doesn't fit into the mold is also sort of a plus in my book.
Kevin Flynn, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Murder on Middle Beach?
Yeah, I'm going to go thumbs up. I'm not usually excited about sort of these personal narrative, there was a crime in my family and this is how it affects me kind of stories, just because that part is really not unusual, right? That it's a tragedy and it's something that you go through. So when it's like, oh, I'm going to investigate my mother's death, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, fine. But he does a really good job, both at the investigation part, the craft of the shooting the documentary and putting it together, and as someone who inserted himself just the right amount into the story. As a crime story, I mean, it's kind of basic as far as, different things that we've talked about. But adding this element of it being a family member and the access that he has, makes it a little different. So, yeah, I'm definitely going to make sure I see that last episode. So thumbs up.
Yeah, this is a big thumbs up for me, too. I actually think Murder on Middle Beach is only partially about the murder on Middle Beach. I think it really actually is a study of an American family. Anybody, if they start interviewing their relatives, don't have to do it for very long. If it's an honest interview, before you get to something super fucked up. I mean, that's just the way families are, right? Like, you can talk to your mother and she'll talk about one of her siblings or something that she did as a kid or whatever. And you're just like, what? Everybody has some sort of dysfunction in their family. This family arguably maybe has more than others. I don't necessarily think so, but that's what makes this so good, is that it's so recognizable, like the parental estrangement, the nutty aunt, the people who are just indulging the kid who, I don't want to like besmirch Madison, but he lets us know like he was on the wrong path for a while. He was sort of like having a hard time himself and really sort of struggled through his adolescence and young adulthood. He's come out the other side of it, and he's really examining not just who killed his mother, but how he was made. And I find that affecting and cool. And I love the way the amateur footage is woven together with the more professional footage. I just think it could be so dumb and ham-fisted and silly, but it really, really works for me. So big thumbs up for me for Murder on Middle Beach.
Disney Plus and Hulu are better together in the Disney Bundle with new movies and series. On Disney Plus, experience the full Taylor Swift The Eras Tour, Taylor's version, with new main show performances and acoustic collection. On Hulu, follow the fantastical evolution of Bella Baxter, played by Emma Stone in the award-winning film Poor Things. All of these and more streaming this month. Get the Disney Bundle with Disney Plus and Hulu. Terms apply. See DisneyBundle.com for details.
Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.
What do you think Madison Hamburg's up to these days, Kevin?
I think he's still filing Freedom of Information Act requests.
Waiting for the cops to get back to him?
Yes. Surreptitious. I think he's probably having a very serious discussion with his dad about why he bugged their meeting at the bar.
Yeah, I don't think Thanksgiving has been very comfortable for those two ever since this documentary.
Awkward for many years now.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I still love this documentary so much. It is a classic, and if you've never watched it, you should set aside some time and do it immediately. Anyway, this show, as always, was recorded in the Treehouse Yoga Studio above the Mockingbird Cafe in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi studio, otherwise known as Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement, where we also are incredibly suspicious of our relatives.
Your cousin shady as F.
On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later. And on this episode, a young filmmaker sets off to find his mother's killer, but instead, I fucking hate this. What? No. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not. That has to be the outtake. It's like a bad college essay, all right?
What does it say? Read it.
Instead finds himself? Oh my God. And on this episode, a young filmmaker sets off to find his mother's killer, but instead
finds himself.
Partners in Crime Media. Luxury is meant to be livable. Discover the new leather collection at Ashley with premium quality leather sofas, recliners, and more, all built to last. No matter how many spills, scuffs, or pet-related mishaps come its way, the leather collection at Ashley is made with the durability you need for the whole family. Shop the new leather collection at Ashley and find chairs starting at $499.99 and sofas at $599.99. Ashley, for the love of home.